Let me just say that if we're riding in an elevator together, please wait until you get off to actually burp. I don't need to smell that Chick-fil-A you ate for lunch, and I definitely don't need to smell that ass that you ate the night before. It's just called proper etiquette, okay? Anyways, all jokes aside, in today's video, we're about to get pretty serious. We're about to get pretty deep. And look, I'll be honest with you guys, not everything is bad here, but I will say when I first saw the images for the latest live stream for the Marvel Legends team, I was very excited. You know, I even texted some of these images to my wife, telling her how excited I was about the entire release. And then I actually got home and I got a closer look at some of these promotional images, and I have to say, my heart sank. A lot of these releases are very subpar. Take the 77 Spider-Man as a perfect example. There's going to be a Walmart exclusive and will be released within the next few months. But this figure is just hideous. And I know it's based on kind of a very obscure, weird source material, but look at those ankles. That's the first thing that I noticed. And maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe it's the angle that is making it look weird, but those ankles look thick, like massively thick. Like not even Allen Iverson could break this dude's ankles. Now I'm going off of just the promotional images and the listings, and I from what I can tell, the legs look at least a little bit different, because if I'm not mistaken, the source material did have the costume fitting a little bit loose, and so I think that's what we're seeing in the leg portion. So those may be brand new, but just when you think you're getting some of the newer tech, right? You got the pinless technology, you're getting brand new legs and a brand new head sculpt. You're not getting any butterfly joints, and you're just getting a single hinge at the mid torso for articulation. Oh, and you're getting those ugly web accessories that nobody uses. You're getting those repacked. We've seen those like maybe, I don't know, a dozen times by now, but you're getting those again. No butterfly joints, no extra mid torso articulation, and just a weird looking figure. And look, I get it, there are people out there that are going to pretend to be diehards of the source material, and it feels like nowadays every single version of Spider-Man is going to be made into action figure form. I will say this is one of those that I'm going to stay away from, but I do respect the fact that Hasbro is giving a lot of deep cuts, even though this is kind of like a double-edged sword. I hate the figure. It doesn't look good. It doesn't have any of the newer technology. It doesn't use any of the newer body molds. But at the same time, I like the fact that they're giving some of these like die-hard, small little fan clubs something that they've probably been desiring for years now. And I know this is going to sound like absolute fanboy nonsense, but I can't get enough of those new boxes. If those are the new Marvel Legends boxes that we're going to be getting for the foreseeable future, that's exciting to me, because it seems like for decades now we've had the exact same box for the Marvel Legends line, you know, aside from like the retro carded stuff. But I really like the box. It looks more sleek, more compact, and I love the art on these newer boxes. And if you're not cursing at the wind just yet, take a look at this quote-unquote Spider-Boy action figure. Now, I'll be brutally honest with you, I only dabble with the comic book industry a little bit here and there, but I do remember the first appearance for Spider-Boy being a really hot commodity. You're talking about a comic book that originally has the cover price of like $4.99, around there, $5.99. But I do remember the first appearance for this particular character having astronomically high prices online. Like I remember this being anywhere from like $65 to $80 depending on the condition. And forget about the ratios. I mean, some of those were going for like $200-$300. This was a comic book character that people were excited for. They were ready for something new when it came down to the Spider-Man universe, and it felt like there had been quite a while since we'd gotten like a really good character. And this is just downright disrespectful. I mean, not only did they give him web shooting hands, which makes no sense because as far as I'm concerned, this particular character does not shoot web, but they're also using that ugly Across the Spider-Verse Miles body mold, if I'm not mistaken, or the Spider-Man one. I don't know which one. I'm not too familiar with it. I haven't picked up any of the Across the Spider-Verse action figures thus far. And look, we knew that they were going to try to find ways to reissue or reutilize that particular body mold, but this just isn't it. I mean, you're talking about the same issues that we just talked about the 77 Spider-Man. No butterfly joints, single hinge torso articulation. I will say I'm not sure what this retro carded action figure wave is supposed to be referencing, but this is a brand new character and it's really weird that it's in like this really cool sleek retro packaging. I would assume this is more reserved for like animated or retro classic Spider-Man characters, so it's kind of a weird mixture here, but I will say this is just really disappointing. It feels like they should have done a little bit more for this particular character, and that body mold does make sense to a certain extent, but that body mold had issues when it first got released, and it continues to have issues. Like the modern articulation isn't there, and they have a couple of poses there where he's supposed to be like kind of hunched over and shooting some webbing, but the dude literally looks like he has a hunchback in that particular pose. Like there are glaring issues with this particular body mold, and they didn't address any of them. They just decided to re-release it. On top of that, you're getting some fisted hands and some web shooting hands, when I feel like the better option here should have been the web crawling hands as well as fisted hands. The web shooting hands just really make no sense here, and it seems like they almost made no effort to try to really understand the character a little bit further. I think they realized their mistake too late, and they try to poke fun at it like, oh, you know, the figure doesn't shoot webbing, but it really doesn't matter because you're still gonna buy it. So it is what it is. Personally, I'm a fan of the character itself, and I was genuinely excited, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be frustrated. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be upset over such a mishandling of a brand new Spider-Man character. Now, I did mention that it wasn't all bad, and there were a couple of reveals that I got really excited about, not because they're perfect figures, but at least because there was some effort placed forward, and there's a decent amount of value with both of these figures. The first one has to be the Spider-Man Unlimited action figure. It comes in that beautiful retro card. You get 6 hands total. I get it. It's not like the best source material. It's a really weird show. It's mostly panned by critics, but I did grow up watching it. This is from like the late 90s. I was still a tiny little single-celled organism, but my tiny little brain was still mush. Like I didn't understand what was good or bad, so I just probably grew up watching anything that was on television or anything that really attracted me, and this particular series was one of those. Just like Batman and Robin, like we grew up watching them. They're not great, but they just kind of give us that nostalgia feel, and so this is one of those that I'm very excited about. Now, personally, I still desperately wish that this was one of the newer body molds. We're still only getting that hinge at the mid torso, but at least we're getting butterfly joints, which I think is like a bare necessity when it comes down to Spider-Man action figures. And eventually we'll get to the point where I desperately need toe articulation on almost all of the Spider-Man figures. I get it that body mold, it's still brand new, and I guess they're working their way to it. I still feel like most of them should be on newer body molds, but at least we're getting the pinless tech, we're getting butterfly joints. It's crazy to think that we're getting to that point where we're actually excited about getting butterfly joints on a Spider-Man figure, even though I feel like those should be pretty basic necessities. Also, no webbing accessories. So it's not the perfect release, but I'm very excited about it. I think there's good value here. You're getting 6 hands total, so you get at least some options when it comes down to displaying this particular figure. And then we have the Agent Venom, which comes with an unmasked head sculpt, I think as well, 6 hands total, and then a couple of different weapons. This is supposed to be like a retooling of that Walgreens version. I'm assuming they did pinless technology and then maybe some slightly upgraded articulation here. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm okay with not great articulation, because if I remember correctly, there is like a soft overlay plastic piece that goes over the chest, so that kind of limits articulation just a little bit. But overall, this is a phenomenal reveal, and this is one that I'm very excited about, specifically because it gives new collectors an opportunity at a character that is, you know, astronomically high in value if you try to buy it like through the third-party market. So you're better off just being patient and picking this one up. But this one has a ton of different upgrades. You're getting weapons, you're getting extra hands, you're getting the unmasked head sculpt, which I think is phenomenal. Comes in that beautiful retro card that we all know and love. The only downside here, from what I can see in the promotional images and from what I remember, I think there are no tendrils with this particular figure. If I remember correctly, the original one had tendrils that ported onto the back. Maybe I'm remembering the wrong one, but I'm pretty sure it had tendrils that ported onto the back. Regardless, this is what I'm referring to when it comes to reuse. Like, even if they were reusing that particular body mold and just used the pinless tech and then the unmasked head sculpt, I would be happy with it. But this one has an insane amount of value, especially for today's standards. You're getting quite a few different accessories, different options when it comes down to displaying. I absolutely love this release. We are also supposed to be getting a No Way Home Lizard. This is in that deluxe setting. It is supposed to be, if I'm not mistaken, an Amazon exclusive, if I remember correctly. This figure looks phenomenal. Again, pinless technology. You can definitely tell that there was a lot of patience with this figure, and they put it together extremely well. The articulation is there. This figure is actually very difficult to see rendered or like in actual action figure form, because the first time around, if I'm not mistaken, the first time that we got like a legitimate lizard, like a deluxe version, it looked really weird. Like the head portrait was just a little bit off, and then the neck was just kind of sticking out there. It looked hideous, and I'm glad that they gave us a new version. Although I will say these are very painful for me, because I wish they were like the original versions. I don't really care too much for Tom Holland or the MCU Spider-Man franchise. I would much rather them be like accurate to like Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, or if they're going to do anything Tobey Maguire, have them actually be based in that universe and then give us other characters from those franchises, rather than just them calling them No Way Home, when in reality we would much rather them be based on the original film franchises. But it is worth mentioning that they were actually able to get him into some pretty cool poses, like whether he was crouched or in like an upright stance, which is really cool. It's not something that we expect usually from this figure, but they did a phenomenal job of just like working on the engineering when it came down to that. The other figure that they also announced was that female Electro. I'm not really going to get too deep into it, because honestly, I'm not too familiar with this character, and there are very few people that are, unless you're actually like legitimately reading comic books. It was an okay reveal. I'm not jizzing myself. I don't think anybody is. I love those really cool electricity effects. I don't think that we've seen those before, and I think we need to see more of that from Hasbro. I think we've gone to the point where every single effect piece that we've seen, or at least that we're getting right now, has been reused like 20 to 30 different times. It's about time they start giving us new accessory pieces. I'm okay with them reusing them for, you know, for multiple different characters if it makes sense, but they're gonna have a lifespan eventually, and I feel like most of the like electricity effects that we've received thus far were really boring, and we're getting old, and we're finally getting new ones. I will say I don't have any connection to the character, and this one is really kind of, you know, if I see it in person or if I find it, I'll probably pick it up. But I'm really disappointed in the fact that this is just another female body. I've said this before, I don't think the female characters get any respect. This body mold is just, it is what it is, right? I mean, we are getting some of the newer female body molds with like the pinless tech, I think double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, but we're still not getting butterfly joints, and then that mid torso articulation is not great. So I think they could do a little bit better there, and we're still getting the same exact body mold over and over. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but I like the fact that they're doing something a little bit more obscure, and they're, you know, kind of like fleshing out the Spider-Man Marvel Legends display for those hardcore Spider-Man fans. We've been getting the same thing over and over. We're getting a brand new character, and I think this is the first version of her in action figure form, at least from the Marvel Legends line. They also announced Chameleon as well as Kane. Both of those renditions, I think, were much appreciated and needed in action figure form, especially for Chameleon. I don't think that we've ever seen this version, or if we did, we saw it like way back in the Toy Biz era. And I will say I'm a little bit disappointed. It doesn't, at least from the promotional images and from what I saw in the footage, it might just be plastic. Like, I don't think there's a lot of paint here. They've been doing a lot of that with the animated series action figures, and I'm okay with it if it makes sense, especially with like the color palette for a lot of these. It makes sense because the animated, you know, was essentially like plain colors. It wasn't like any extra shading or anything crazy like that, unless there was shading, but in most cases it was just like a very simplistic color palette, and so I think it makes sense. In terms of Kane, I might have like fallen as a child on my head or just drank too much warm milk, but I just don't remember this, or maybe I do remember like in the back of my mind this version of Kane, but my version of Kane is always like the, you know, black and red suit. But the figure does look really well done. Again, pinless technology, all of the extra accessory, or all of the extra articulation that you usually get with these newer body molds. Now, I think this figure is the one that has the least amount of value, because it just comes, I think, with a couple of extra hands, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm just going off of of the images or the screenshots that I took, whereas in Chameleon does come with a couple of weapons, the Jonah Jameson mask, as well as a couple of extra hands. So I think that's the one that has the least amount of value, whereas in like you look at, for example, the Agent Venom or the lady version of Electro or the female version, those have way more accessories, even Spider-Man Unlimited. So it's just a matter of personal perspective. These are two of the ones that I kind of am excited for, but they're not necessarily like must-haves, or they're not on my wish list per se. But it's cool that they're going back and giving us even more characters to kind of flesh out our Spider-Man display. There was an X-Men wave released, and I guess I'll save that for a separate video just because I don't want to ramble on too much. And the entire video was mostly geared towards the Spider-Man reveals, just because I feel like those, at least to me, resonate a little bit more with the fan base. The X-Men usually has like a much smaller fan base, or more dedicated fans, I should say, whereas in like Spider-Man, I feel like most people tend to gravitate towards that, and the main like theme of the video mostly fit the Spider-Man action figures. But I will say, all in all, it's a hugely mixed bag. I mean, I think there are like 2 to 3 figures that I'm like genuinely excited for, and there's value, and the figures actually look like they're going to display well, whereas in the rest, I think are huge misses. Just to recap, I mean, Spider-Boy, just the wrong hands there, the wrong body mold, awful articulation. I can't believe we're still getting that. Same thing with the 77 Spider-Man, but still no butterfly joints, and then the single hinge at the mid-torso. That still doesn't make any sense in my mind. And I will say, bare minimum that Hasbro could do here, like if you're not going to give us like a perfect Spider-Man action figure, like if you're still going to give us an older body mold, which they shouldn't, but let's say hypothetically they are going to give us one with no butterfly joints, and then it's still the single hinge and then no toe articulation, bare minimum the least you could do, Hasbro, is throw in some extra accessories. You're not even getting that with Spider-Boy. You're getting the bare minimum. Same thing with the 77 Spider-Man. It's not like you're getting a bunch of different accessories. I think those were very lackluster, but then they came back and hit us with like Chameleon, which is pretty cool, the Kane action figure, as well as the Agent Venom and the Spider-Man Unlimited, which I'm very, very excited about. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I'm just very frustrated with some of these releases. Like I said, I know some people are out there that just appreciate the characters for themselves. They don't really care about tech or technology or any of the newer body molds or articulation. And so, you know, I wish I could live like that in pure ignorance and bliss, but I can't. Usually when I see a figure, I tend to kind of like look at some of the closer details, and it's pretty frustrating. And I feel like not many people are talking about this. Everybody's just out there jizzing over the new waves, and I feel like we need to pay more attention to things like this. This is the biggest OM, okay? This is one of the biggest OM. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. We shouldn't still be seeing like 10-year-old body molds. I'm happy that it appears most of the figures on this particular release, or on this wave, are pinless, and some of them have some of the newer tech, but we're still missing, you know, that like double, you know, midsection articulation or toe articulation. New accessories, that's been kind of a big talking point. We are getting one here, and then another one for that X-Men wave, which, like I said, I'll talk about in a separate video. But I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, for listening to me ramble on about action figures. If you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to stay tuned. We do this pretty consistently. I think we're ramping up to like 3 to 4 on a weekly basis. I'm going to try to be a little bit more positive. I know sometimes my video tends to be negative, and I know some people have called me out for that, but it's not that I'm being negative. I'm just trying to look at things from a completely different perspective. I'm trying to break things down a little bit more. I'm not just one of those you know, content creators that just says or has the phrase of like, if you don't like it, move on. No, I do feel like we should pay attention to things that are not being done well by the OM, and we should talk about it. But again, just my personal take, my personal humble opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys for the support. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby, pose your action figures, have fun with them, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.